1 year ago, Amazon's Fallout series concluded, and many consider it one of the best video game adaptations of all time. In a time where most video game adaptations fail, and where most adaptations in general are not good at all, how was Amazon's Fallout able to succeed? What went on behind the scenes that led to Fallout not only being a great show, but one of the best video game adaptations? Now, before we talk about all that, it's important we look at the production history of the show. The Fallout franchise has been around for almost 30 years, debuting in 1997. However, since 2008, the year Fallout 3 would release, Bethesda had been approached a handful of times about adapting Fallout into a television series. Now, unlike other studios that would gladly rush the show into development, Bethesda was cautious about a Fallout series. Todd Howard, Bethesda's lead director and executive producer, felt none of these pitches met the vision of the Fallout series. In 2015, Bethesda's marketing executive Pete Hines warned the company about the dangers of a bad adaptation and how that could affect the Fallout brand. This attitude from Bethesda is incredibly rare. As we'll cover in a second, very few people behind adaptations have this same philosophy. So if Bethesda was so concerned about a Fallout adaptation, then what changed? Well, the studio was approached by none other than Jonathan Nolan. Many know Nolan simply as the brother to esteemed director Christopher Nolan, but Jonathan Nolan is a well-respected writer and director by his own right. Jonathan Nolan was responsible for the widely acclaimed series Westworld. Maybe more importantly, however, Nolan was a big fan of the Fallout games. It's not as if Bethesda wanted to make a TV show and they sought him out. Nolan went to Bethesda himself. After some negotiations and realizing Nolan had a clear vision for the series, Todd Howard greenlit the project and gave Nolan free reign to tell his own story. The only condition Nolan was given was that he stay truthful to the Fallout universe and that it would be its own new and unique story, rather than a direct adaptation of one of the existing games. The caution and care Bethesda and Howard showed for the Fallout franchise is a rare thing in Hollywood. Over the past 2 months, I've spent most of my time making videos discussing adaptations. I've covered some great adaptations, I've covered some pretty disappointing adaptations, and I've covered truly awful adaptations. When going through the poor adaptations, I am continuously astonished by what the creatives had to say. The creatives behind Netflix's Avatar: The Last Airbender spoke about how much they loved the original show, which is a good sign, but they also mentioned how in their adaptation they made story changes to modernize the show, to make it feel less iffy, whatever that means. Now, it may be more fair to compare the Fallout adaptation to the Halo adaptation. Both are video game adaptations of hugely successful franchises. Video games have a peculiar history of adaptations, so how did these two franchises handle it? As we just mentioned, Bethesda repeatedly rejected adaptation requests because they felt it didn't match their version of the franchise. Only once they heard a great idea did they actually put the show into development. With Halo, the show was announced in 2013 and was put into production hell, repeatedly rewriting scripts and finding new showrunners until they finally got it off the ground. After all this waiting, they hired a guy who had never played the games and openly stated that while writing the show, he never even looked at the games. The producers behind Halo basically said they were more concerned about giving the writers creative freedom than they were about staying faithful to the games. This is just a historically stupid way to approach adapting a story. When a studio is adapting something, a book, a comic, a video game, whatever, why are they spending money on said project? Because they know it's an easy way to guarantee viewers. I bet you maybe 95% of people who watched the Fallout show watched it because they were either fans of the games or were aware of the games. Now, of course, with adaptations, things need to change. Different mediums require different modes of storytelling. But if you're going to rely on a fan's love for a story you didn't create for viewership, you owe it to those fans to stay as faithful as possible. I am not going to budge on this. I don't care if staying faithful to the games limits your creative freedom, Kiki Wolfkill. The only reason this show was greenlit in the first place is because of the fans who spent their time and money on the Halo games. So with Fallout, right away these were some good signs for the series. Now, staying faithful means more than just the aesthetics. Sure, the Fallout show could have given the characters the iconic blue Vault Dweller suits, they could have had the famous knight armor, they could have had a bunch of minor details that are copy and pasted straight from the games. This is of course appreciated. You can often tell that only someone who loves the games could have put these small details in the show. But adaptations need to be more than that. What are the games actually about? What's Fallout actually about? Is it just a mindless, soulless shooter? Or is there something deeper the games are trying to convey? Fallout is a series that has complex themes about war, humanity, unchecked power, survival, etc. If you never played the games and you just watched the show, could you come away with the same conclusions about what the story is actually about? With the Fallout show, this is without question the case. The show deeply interrogates all those things I previously mentioned. When you look up what are the main themes of Fallout, the first thing that comes up is war never changes. This sentiment is basically shared verbatim by the Ghoul at the end of the series. Along with the themes, the tone of the show matches the games pretty well. The Fallout show is not a super serious drama about nuclear warfare. It has serious themes, but it is also a bit of a dark comedy. So again, the show nails it on that front. Of course, staying faithful matters, but none of it matters unless you capture the feeling of the source material. What do I mean by this? Some of us may act like we consume stories logically or whatever, that some movies or shows are objectively good or bad, but in reality, the reason we all love movies, shows, or video games are because of how they make us feel. Adapting a video game is unique in this regard because it's an active medium. You watch movies and you watch shows, but you play video games. When you play Fallout, you create a story for yourself. You walk around, create characters, upgrade the characters, so on and so forth. The YouTube channel like Stories of Old made a great point about why video game adaptations have largely been so bad. It's because these movies and shows have failed to capture what it feels like to play a video game. The Sonic movies are fun for sure, but do they actually capture what it feels like to play a Sonic game? You tell me, I'm not sure. When you turn on the Halo show for the first time, you hoped it captured the same feeling you felt when you played the games. When you play Halo, it feels like a military shooter about the survival of humanity. That's why it was so disappointing when it turned out to be an interpersonal character drama. There are even some video games out there that are actually fairly easy to adapt. The Last of Us was a great adaptation, but the game itself is not hard to adapt. The Last of Us is a story-focused game. It's cinematic enough to where cutscenes could basically be an animated movie. Fallout is not like this. I would argue the gameplay and the experience of Fallout is more important than the story it's trying to tell. I am not saying the story isn't important, I'm saying certain games are great mostly because of what the game has to offer as a video game. So again, how do you adapt a game when the best parts of the game are the stories you created for yourself? Well, the Fallout show does this in so many ways. Fans have pointed out how Lucy's introduction in the show feels like creating your own character. In Fallout, there are these special attributes that are the core attributes of the characters in the game. I've seen people try to discuss what Lucy's traits would be. Better yet, Bethesda themselves came out and revealed their official attributes for Lucy. You could probably do this for Maximus, the Ghoul, and Norm as well. When Lucy wanders out in the wasteland for the first time, it feels like how you wander out in the wasteland in the games. You come across quirky people and strange beasts like in the games. A big ongoing joke in Fallout is supposedly how easily you can get caught in side quests and whatnot. A show is a perfect medium to adapt a game like this, because Lucy and the other characters go through side quest after side quest. The Ghoul even jokes about this. Like Stories of Old has another great example about this. When you go on a side quest in a game, why do you go on that side quest? It's not just because you like wasting your time, it's because you want to better your character in some way. Go on this side quest and unlock a new piece of armor or a new new ability or a new weapon or even a new skin. How many times have you been eligible to fight the final boss, but you waited because you wanted to beef up your character first? When Lucy goes on these side quests, she always comes out better than she was before. When she was sent to the organ harvester, by the time she left, she was a lot wiser about the world she was in, she gained some much needed experience, and she even had a new look. This is just one example of many. Of course, telling a good story matters. I'll dive deep into the story in a bit and why it works so well, but capturing the feeling of the Fallout games in the Fallout show is without question one of the biggest reasons why the show was so successful. Shocker, it's also a reason why Fallout fans were so receptive to the show. People love to say fan service is a bad thing. When you're talking about fan service for nostalgia purposes, I would agree, but when you're talking about an adaptation, 90% of the time, fan service is a good thing. There are so many little Easter eggs in the show that fans light up over after seeing, and the best part is that none of it is overwhelming. If you're someone who has never played a Fallout game, not once while watching the show do you feel like the story is pausing so it could wink towards the fans. I recently watched Arcane. Mind you, I am someone who knows literally nothing about League of Legends. There's this brief moment where Jinx calls Vi fat hands.
Go right ahead, fat hands!
I thought it was a funny moment, it fits Jinx's character, and I didn't think much else of it. I later learned that in League of Legends, Jinx calls Vi fat hands.
I'm over here, fat hands!
So this was an Easter egg in the show that I was completely oblivious to, and that's a good thing. It pleased the fans without distracting the newer viewers. I'm not the most well-versed Fallout fan, so I won't go through every Easter egg, but while I was doing my research, I saw so many videos pointing out these Easter eggs. When you please the fans, great things happen. If fans of the games like the show, they may feel more inclined to replay some of the older games, and if newer viewers really like the show, they may feel inclined to try out the games for the first time. There were reports that came out that said the Fallout player base increased in the days the show came out. I wonder why the player base went up. Oh wait, I do know why. Because the show respected the source material and it felt like Fallout. Now before we talk about the story, I promise I'll get there, we need to talk about the last critical aspect of this adaptation that made it work. And that's how the Fallout show is not a direct adaptation. When you think of an adaptation, you think that X is adapting Y. The Lord of the Rings movies adapted the Lord of the Rings books. The Last of Us show adapted the Last of Us game. Fallout, however, is not a direct adaptation. It's not like Jonathan Nolan adapted Fallout 4 or Fallout New Vegas. He wrote a completely new story set in the same canon of the Fallout universe. I mentioned this before. This was one of the prerequisites that Howard had for Nolan. Telling a new story in this universe is a great way to make an adaptation. The writers aren't worried about adapting a specific story with specific characters with specific arcs. They can tell new stories with new characters and new arcs. This is the type of freedom you want to give your writers, not whatever the producers of Halo thought. It's also just so refreshing. With Netflix's Avatar, I'm wondering how season 2 will adapt a season of a show I already watched. With this Snow White movie that comes out next week, I'm wondering how that's going to adapt a movie that I already watched. With Fallout, it's so refreshing to consume a new story. It also adds to the Fallout lore. You're expanding the universe, not shrinking it or repeating it. Saying adaptation may not even be the correct word, but we need more adaptations like this. When other studios are making an adaptation of any kind, they need to research what went on behind the scenes of Fallout. It's amazing how great things happen when you try to honor the source material as much as possible, especially when said source material is already pretty great. But of course, none of this faithfulness matters if the story you are telling is not compelling. So what I want to do is dive deep into each one of the 3 major characters and dive deep into how each one is wonderfully written. Not only that, but also how each of these 3 stories converge into a perfect season finale. But before we continue on with the rest of this video, only 16.3% of viewers are subscribed to this channel. So if you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing for more content like this. Thank you. We're gonna start with Lucy, then Maximus, then wrap up with the Ghoul. When you look at wonderfully written characters and stories, every part of the character works in tandem with each other to tell an effective story. This is exactly what Lucy is. When we meet Lucy, she fits the character type of the goody two-shoes, perfect vault dweller. She's an optimistic and caring person, she loves her community and her family, she wants what's best for those around her. Maybe most importantly, however, she believes in the golden rule, which is basically treating others the way you want to be treated. Why is Lucy this way? Sure, it could have been easy to just say she's naturally a good person, but the writers made it clear that the reason Lucy has all these good attributes is because that is how she was raised. She is like this because of what her father taught her and because of what the vaults represent. Tying such a big part of her identity to her father and the vaults is such a great way to set up her character dynamic later on. She believes in the mission of the vaults, so what happens when that's challenged? But before we get there, Lucy leaves the vaults for the first time so she can find her father. It's a very standard trope and it's not subtle at all. Lucy leaving her home to explore the real world for the first time. Through her perspective, we get to learn about the surface world at the same time that she does. When she gets to Philly and sees all the crazy stuff going on there, since we are experiencing all this stuff for the first time along with Lucy, it puts us in her shoes and allows us to relate with her. Such an important part of storytelling is putting characters in situations the audience finds compelling. If you took Lucy and had her explore Los Angeles in 2025 for the first time, that just wouldn't be as interesting. But because the surface world of Fallout is pretty much the polar opposite of the Vault world, seeing Lucy discover this new world is compelling. When Miss Goody Two-Shoes meets up with Mr. I like to kill everyone, that is a compelling situation to watch. Fallout is so good at this, putting characters in situations or pairing certain characters together that are compelling to the viewer. The second episode establishes the essential question of Lucy's story, the question that will follow her throughout this season and likely for her entire story. Will Lucy change for the worse? Will the surface world break her great qualities and turn her into a bad or selfish person? Wilzig says she will be forced to adapt, so the question is, how much will she adapt? Throughout the entire season, Lucy is put in situation after situation where her identity is challenged. The surface world is not receptive to literally everything she represents. So how do you grow a character without having their core beliefs change? You do this by giving Lucy a lot of flaws to begin the series. Lucy is fairly naive about the people on the surface world. Initially, she tries to solve everything diplomatically through her persuasion and charisma. This more often than not doesn't work, so what she is forced to do is use her other skills to solve problems, skills that require her to take action rather than inaction. Instead of talking her way out of every situation, sometimes she needs to fight her way out, which we see her do a lot more as the season progresses. She simply can't trust everyone will do the right thing. She has to be more wary of who she can and can't trust, something that happens a lot more as the season progresses. It's important to note that Lucy very easily could have been an annoying character. Characters that seem perfect can often feel very unlikable because they're so self-righteous. With Lucy, credit needs to go to Ella Purnell. Honestly, her portrayal of the character is the biggest reason why Lucy is so likable. She brings this warmth and wholesomeness to her that makes her naivety often feel cute. The writers were also smart to put Lucy in situations where her flaws present a funny situation. Like when she first tells the Ghoul to stand down, her cluelessness about the situation is simply funny. The other thing that's important about Lucy is that she has other character traits that aren't being positive. Lucy can fight if she wants to. This is clearly established in the first episode. When her vault is getting attacked, she doesn't helplessly yell at everyone to stop fighting because it's wrong. She takes action and stops the fighting. That's an admirable trait, and it gets us to like her. So as these episodes progress, it's not about her learning new skills in this world, it's about her learning how to properly use her skills on this surface world. She has the skills, she just has to learn to use them. Her first big challenge is with the Ghoul. He represents the antithesis of Lucy. He even seems to go out of his way to treat her poorly just to mock her golden rule. He also pretty much gives up Lucy to die. How does Lucy respond to this? She fights her way out, and she's clearly more jaded about this, but in the end, she maintains her core values. Despite what he did to her, she still helps him out in the end. This was Lucy's first test. She changed, but didn't change her core beliefs. She didn't change who Lucy really is. Lucy is also a great foil to the Ghoul because of what she represents to his story, but we'll cover that in a bit. At around the halfway point of the season, Lucy meets up with Maximus. It's important that Lucy is challenged throughout the series, but also that she's rewarded. She was initially scared to trust Maximus because she had not come across a single trustworthy person on the surface, but her better instincts kick in and she frees Maximus. This pays off because if she didn't let him out of the armor, she would have literally died from radiation sickness. The sequence shows progression because she didn't blindly trust Maximus. She showed caution before she freed him, something episode 1 Lucy probably wouldn't have done. To piggyback off a point I made before, this show is great at pairing up characters. Lucy and Maximus are a great pair of characters. They both grew up in a sheltered world, they're both generally good people, and they also have unique skill sets that can help them survive this world. The writers also do a good job of showing why Lucy would be romantically interested in someone like Maximus. In a world full of terrible people, Maximus is the one good person she finds. Maximus, from her perspective, just wants to help people, and that's a trait she finds admirable. When Maximus confesses to her that he lied about being a knight and that he let the original knight die, this actually makes Lucy like him even more. Maximus had no reason to tell the truth. He could have kept the lie and she would have never found out. Him opening up and telling the truth shows Lucy what kind of person he is. That's why she likes him. The end of the season does something that I love, and that's to destroy a character's worldview. As I mentioned before, Lucy's whole identity is based upon the foundation that her father taught her. From her perspective, she represents her father and the vaults. So what is the worst possible thing that can happen to her? She learns that her father is an evil man and that the mission of the vaults is all a lie. There was a colony on the surface, but that went against the goals of Vault-Tec, so Hank killed them all. Hank didn't treat others the way he wanted to be treated. He breaks the golden rule. When Lucy's mother tried to give her children a better life, Hank killed her because she went against Vault-Tec. The vaults also aren't a system used to bring back the best of America. It's just a company simply looking to profit from the death of billions. This destroys Lucy. Everything about why she is who she is a lie. Now, season 1 doesn't give Lucy a complete arc, and that is perfectly fine, by the way. Season 1 gave Lucy a bunch of challenges to overcome, but it ended with her biggest challenge of all. How will she endure in season 2? Will she hold up all her values even though they were built on lies? We'll have to find out. Fallout does a great job at leaving storylines in really interesting places for season 2. With Lucy, will she change after learning the truth about her father? That is such a great cliffhanger for her character. Lucy was a great character and a great protagonist for the show. Everything about her worked in tandem to create a fascinating character with a really intriguing trajectory come season 2. Maximus is another character who has a fairly traditional character arc, but one that works well and is just as layered as Lucy's. Maximus grew up in Shady Sands. After it was bombed, he was saved by a knight. Ever since then, he has built up this image of what a knight of the Brotherhood should be. Someone who fights for good and who helps people. This is what Maximus strives to be. But after being recruited by the Brotherhood, his life has not met his expectations. He is repeatedly bullied by others in the Brotherhood. He often doesn't feel like he belongs, and especially with Titus, he doesn't believe some of these people should even be knights. He is the underdog character who we want to see rise to the top and become that knight. What makes Maximus a far more interesting character is the little dark side within him. Despite his end goal being wanting to help people, he does have a selfishness about it. When his friend goes off to become a squire, he is initially very jealous. When discussing if he was responsible for Dane's injury, he said he didn't do it, but he was glad that it happened. He wants to be the one who becomes a knight, not one of his friends. When he squires for Titus and realizes what a terrible person he is, he lets Titus die because Titus doesn't deserve that armor. Titus did not match that vision he had of what a knight should be. When Thaddeus appears, he initially wants to treat him poorly like how he was treated. He even gets a bit of a power trip by asking Thaddeus to clean his cockpiece. But as we come to learn, despite his little dark side, Maximus is a good person. When he has the opportunity to, he does help people. He does save Lucy, who was a complete stranger to him. He does help that one random person that he came across in the desert. And despite wanting to treat Thaddeus terribly, he does treat him well and he even helps save him. The vibe I get from Maximus is that he wants to help people because it makes him feel better about himself. Despite having this darker side, Maximus is ashamed of it. He doesn't like that he has these darker thoughts. He does have this the ends justify the means personality. He's gladly willing to see others get hurt if it means he can be the one to help people. This is the case with Titus, and this was also the case with the people of Vault 4. He was willing to take their power core and leave them for dead so he can power his own suit. This stuff makes Maximus a complex character. His darker side, and his willingness to use the ends to justify the means. So if Maximus isn't truly motivated by wanting to help people, then what is he motivated by? Well, he's motivated by connection. He just wants to be a part of a community or a family that loves him and doesn't judge him. He wants to be in a place where he doesn't need to feel ashamed about some of his past actions. This is why Maximus was so willing to reveal his true identity to Thaddeus. After the two had bonded together so nicely, he felt that maybe he could find a true connection with him. So he was willing to risk his position if it meant he could have a friend. He wants to be wanted, but that didn't go as planned. Everything changes when he meets Lucy. Lucy is someone who doesn't judge him and sees the best in him. She also is kind and caring. She has this goodness that no one else has in his life. Lucy is the type of person that Maximus wants in his life. The biggest moment for Maximus was probably when he got to the vault. Initially, he was skeptical because he should be, but as time progresses, he comes to love the vaults. The people in the vaults are exactly like Lucy, kind and caring without reason. They give him snacks, a hot shower, even slippers. Maximus loves it here. So when Lucy eventually proposes that Maximus come live with her in her vault, of course he accepts it right away. If Lucy's vault is anything like Vault 4, he will have everything he's ever wanted. So at this point in the story, Maximus's desires have completely shifted. He no longer wants to become a knight and make the Brotherhood happy, he just wants to be with Lucy and the vaults. He wants that family and connection. Come the end of the season, just like with Lucy's story, Maximus's story employs a trope that I love, and that's giving your character everything they ever wanted, only to realize it doesn't make them happy. At the end of the season, after being suspected of killing Moldaver, he is rewarded with the rank of Knight. He is now Knight Maximus, but that's not what he wants anymore. He wants to be with Lucy. So come season 2, how will he handle being the thing he always wanted? Maximus is a well-written three-dimensional character. In a way, he's more interesting than Lucy because he's a lot more flawed than she is. I'm really curious to see where they take his character in season 2 now that he's a knight. The Ghoul is another fascinating character to me because I typically don't love his type of character. What I mean is that his transformation happened in the past. So as the season progresses, we cut back and forth between who he is now and who he once was. The reason I don't love this storytelling technique is because it can often distract from the main story. Unless I'm actively invested in the character, then I'm not going to want to see what happened in their past. But thankfully, Cooper Howard, aka the Ghoul, was a fascinating character. It should be emphasized right away that Walton Goggins is a great actor, and it's no surprise he's able to add so much energy to these scenes and to this character. His performance is a big reason why I was invested in Cooper, so props there. When it comes to the actual writing, the essential question surrounding his character is how did he become this way? What happened to Cooper, this once nice and caring man, and what caused him to become frankly a terrible person 200 some years later? More importantly, is there anything left of Cooper in the Ghoul? Let's talk about the past first. Cooper was a Hollywood star. These flashbacks initially focus a lot on his career and how he views himself. He doesn't feel comfortable playing characters that aren't good people. This was something he was frustrated about in one of his scenes. He's obviously a good person and a good husband and father, but what the flashbacks focus more on is his patriotism. He loves his country and he is proud that he fought to protect America's freedoms. As he says, he fought for the American dream. He was a soldier in some war, and he cares deeply about the people he fought with. He also loves his wife deeply. He was willing to hurt his career in Hollywood so he could be the face of Vault-Tec, something that makes his wife very happy. So as the flashbacks progress, subtle red flags start to appear to Coop. His wife seems increasingly more preoccupied with her work, not reciprocating his affection as much. His friends tell him about the dangers of Vault-Tec and why they can't be trusted. He even meets with Moldaver, who employs Cooper to spy on his wife so he can learn what she's she's really like. Cooper definitely feels guilty about this. He's supposed to be the loving and caring husband. It's wrong of him to spy on his wife. He wants to trust her and believe she is doing the right thing. But after Barb suggests that dogs can't be in the vaults, Coop grows increasingly concerned about his freedoms and decides to finally spy on his wife. There he learns the terrible truth that Vault-Tec is not only willing to sacrifice the lives of billions of people, but that his wife personally suggested dropping the bombs. This was the ultimate betrayal to Cooper. Off-screen, apparently the two got divorced, and then the bombs were actually dropped, which is the cold open of the series. In the present, Cooper is now the Ghoul, and he is a widely well-known bounty hunter. At first, it's a mystery as to what his larger goals are. He bounty hunts and keeps himself non-feral with these drugs, but it's not clear to the audience why he wants to stay alive. You'd think someone who lives such a miserable life and who is already part zombie would gladly just die off. This is something that Lucy asks the Ghoul herself. But at the end of the season, we learn that the reason he keeps himself alive is so he can find his family. This is what motivates him in the present and will motivate him in season 2. This alone isn't the most compelling story in the world. What makes it work for me is how it mirrors Lucy's story and how it builds tension. With Lucy, it's obvious that we can draw parallels between her and who Cooper Howard was. Both were optimistic and good people who wanted to believe in others. Cooper was eventually betrayed, and now he's the cynical Ghoul. Here comes a vault dweller, one that not only reminds him of Vault-Tec, the thing that separated him from his family, but also Lucy reminds him of himself. This is why the Ghoul is so adamant about crushing Lucy's spirit. Deep down, he's definitely ashamed about the person he became. He's not happy that he's a Ghoul who gleefully kills people. He was broken by this world. Therefore, he doesn't want to see other people beat this world. He wants Lucy to be just as miserable as him. If she can survive all this and still have that good heart, then what does that say about him that he couldn't? Eventually, his biggest fears become true. Lucy doesn't become cynical, even going as far as saving his life. This is the main reason I found their dynamic to be so compelling. I am invested in seeing if Lucy will become like the Ghoul. Now, the way the season ends only further perpetuates this question. Lucy was betrayed by her father. Everything she thought she knew about him turned out to be a lie. The same thing happened with Cooper and his wife. So come season 2, the essential question surrounding Lucy is even stronger. It was the betrayal from his wife that really broke Cooper, so will it be the betrayal of her father that breaks Lucy? This is what good writing is. Characters that go on arcs that build off each other. Cooper is an excellent foil to Lucy, and it's a big reason why his arc is so engaging. Now, the other reason his story was so compelling was because of how much tension was built. In the final episode, we get the big reveal about Vault-Tec's plans. The plan was that they were going to drop the bombs themselves, live out the next 300 years or so, and then reappear. The reason the flashbacks with Cooper Howard were so engaging was because of how it complemented Norm's story and partially Lucy's story. As the season goes on, through each of these three characters, we progressively start to get the vibe that something isn't quite adding up. With Lucy, Shady Sands being a city that had tens of thousands of people goes against what she was raised to believe. With Norm, he progressively starts to grow weary of Vault 31 and what they've been up to. With Cooper in the past, he starts to grow weary of what his wife is up to with the vaults. All three of these storylines progressively lead us to believe more and more that Vault-Tec is up to something. Because all three of these storylines climax at the same time, the viewer is hit with that emotion 3 times over. Within a minute, we learn Vault 31 is just where managers are housed, we learn Vault-Tec personally dropped the bombs, we learn Barbara betrayed Cooper, and we learn that Hank and Vault-Tec are evil. This is how you climax a show with multiple storylines. This is also why Norm's story works so well while being a side story, because it's relevant to the main story and pays off the most powerful moment of the season. The thought and care that went into this show is felt around every corner. Of course, there are plenty of moments that appease the fans in many ways, but Jonathan Nolan's top priority was clearly telling a great story in this universe. And he spent his time crafting well-written characters with deep motivations and flaws. And the way all these stories come together in the finale was perfect, and it makes me desperately want to see season 2. This is up there as one of the best adaptations, let alone video game adaptations. Both critics and fans seem to love the show. On Rotten Tomatoes, the season scored a 94% along with a 91% audience score, and on IMDb, the season scored an 8.3 out of 10. The highest rated episode of the season was the season finale, The Beginning, with an 8.9 out of 10, and the lowest rated episode was the third episode, The Head, with a 7.9 out of 10. What did you think about Fallout Season 1, and are you looking forward to Fallout Season 2? Let me know down below. Thank you everyone so much for watching another one of my videos. Don't forget to unite the Claude Squad, and I'll see you guys next time.